Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to take a closer look at the point of sale functions in version 12, and more specifically, how they can be tweaked and customized and otherwise made more efficient depending on what kind of a workflow that you need. As we jump into those details, just a few things about how you can communicate with me today in this session. We are making use of GoToWebinar as we have in the past for other sessions, and you'll have a GoToWebinar toolbar on your screen when I'm seeing all of you coming in and having your seat during this session. So on that toolbar, there is a questions box. And at any point during today's broadcast, if you have a question concerning the topic, feel free to go ahead and type that into the questions box, and I will see those as they come in, and I will do my best to answer them as we go along. If that webinar toolbar is taking up too much screen real estate and you're having a hard time seeing my screen, there's a small orange arrow that you can click on, or rather it's a small orange box with a white arrow in it that you can click on, and that'll shrink it off to the side so that that way you can have a full screen view of everything that I am presenting today. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going on here. Now, what we're using today, I've been using the same AIM system that I've been using in some of the other webinars I've been doing. So if you're not in the music industry today, don't worry too much about that. The concepts are basically the same. So hopefully that won't be a distraction from our topics. Now, if you have checked out the other couple of webinars I've done on point of sale, you might already be familiar with how you can go in and edit the menus and what some of the different functions are. So I'm not going to spend too much time on those. Those are still available and those webinars are still relevant to today's topics and to using the system as it stands. Those are only actually about a year old now at this point, those particular webinars. But what I'm going to take a closer look at is maybe some strategies for how you can set up point of sale. So when it comes to setting up point of sale, sometimes it's good to just kind of see one in action. So I'm just going to hop over really quick into a quick sale. Now, if you're coming from version 11 into version 12 or any other prior versions, there's a key strategy difference between quick sale and point of sale. It used to be that point of sale was kind of specific to a particular customer account, and quick sale is now was always about the everyman, the every woman who just came in. They were making a quick purchase. They just wanted to pay for it, be on their way out the door, and didn't want to record a specific customer account in your system to that. And that's still for the most part the case. However, you'll notice when I clicked into to quick sale, it opened up right away here into my point of sale screen. But what you might also notice is that there's still options here for going into the different types of modes that are only available for a point of sale session to a specific customer account. Approvals, delayed deliveries, layaways, proposals, all these different functions that have to be specific to a particular customer account are still here in quick sale. So the main difference now between point of sale and quick sale is that when I finish up a sale, let me get the questions box out of the way here for just a moment. The main difference now between the two is that when I wrap up a quick sale and I go ahead and I tender it, and I'll just go ahead and say that that was paid with cash, and I'll say okay and finalize. Basically, the key difference now is that quick sale is kind of one and done. It's basically you're done with the sale and it goes back to the main screen. Whereas if I go into point of sale and I go ahead and I pull up an account, so we'll go ahead and pull up good old Mr. Mike Anderson here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and scan and sell a bottle of valve oil here, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing. We'll take payment and we'll finalize. and it'll ask for the receipt. And I'm going to hit cancel on that. Now you'll basically the big difference there, and I just realized I have batch mode turned off. I'll talk about that too. Basically, the normal difference is that it'll go right into the next sale for point of sale. So it'll ask you who's the next customer in line. And if that next customer in line happens to be just wanting to be in and out, they don't want to give their information really quick, this QS button that you see up here will automatically select the quick cash account for your given store location. So by clicking on that, that will go ahead, it'll keep you in point of sale, but it will now sell it to the cash sale account. So basically, the idea there is that you can still keep on rolling with transactions, and you don't have to worry about specifically capturing or even creating a customer account. Now, as you're doing that, if it's determined that they actually do need to have an account in the system, you can always click up here on the sold to account button, and you can actually create account for them at that time. So that's kind of the idea with that. Now, you might have just noticed that I mentioned that it closed out of there. In fact, you just saw that happen. So there's some settings that you might want to be aware of, depending on, again, your situation for your store, where you can turn some things on and off, and we're going to take a look at those now. So let's go into maintenance, let's go into general maintenance, and let's go into your workstation settings first and foremost. So in your workstation settings here for the given workstation, there's a few things that you'll want to be cognizant of. If we go take a look at the POS tab, first and foremost, you'll see there's an option here that says point of sale only. And this is going to be a great advantage for your front counter computers that should be residing 99.9% in point of sale. Because when you select that, instead of when you logging in, it comes to this main menu, it goes straight to point of sale, and it stays in point of sale until you log back out and then log back in and tell it that you're logging in what's known as back office mode. So that's kind of the idea with that. That's one thing that you'll want to be considerate of. While we're here in the POS settings for specifically for your workstation settings, you'll notice next to that is a new posting logon. Now that is no different from prior versions of AIM, where if that is checkmarked, then basically each time you run a new transaction, it's going to ask you to log in. So if you've got multiple people using the register, basically it'll go ahead and log out and ask you to log in each time. That way, if you've got someone who wants to come up and process a transaction for their sales history, you can definitely do that. That's primarily from an employee who's getting the employee credit basically for each transaction there. Some other settings that we're going to take a look at are going to be found actually on the miscellaneous tab. On the miscellaneous tab, you have some new options over here, such as the disable batch program mode. That was what I was saying was when I closed out and finished the point of sale, it went ahead and shut it down. The concept of a batch program is that you can keep on staying in that program until you specifically cancel out of it. So with that unchecked, let me just go ahead and I'm going to actually uncheck that point of sale mode only option back here. I'm going to uncheck the batch program mode. I'm going to save that change. And then back in point of sale, when I go in and let's just do a quick sale, and we'll go ahead and scan the RT14 again. So we'll go ahead, tender, and take a payment. And then we'll say okay and finalize. And assuming I didn't have to log out and log back in, that should now stay in point of sale. You can see how now it's taking me back to the customer search box for the next transaction. Now, I don't want to do another transaction, so you'll notice I close that and it closes the program. Another setting to feed into that is if most of your sales are what you might call quick cash sales. In other words, they're not for a specific customer account. Another setting here in your miscellaneous tab over here in these settings is the option to default the point of sale to the cash account. So you'll notice if I check mark this, and then I'll save that change. Let's go back into point of sale. Now notice I'm specifically clicking on point of sale, and you'll see it takes me into point of sale, but it's not going to ask me who is the customer account. So while we strongly recommend that you try and capture as many customer accounts as possible, if you are more of a high volume type store where you have a lot of non-repeat customers, or maybe the transactions are so minor that you're not worrying about tracking the specific customer accounts, then this could be a big benefit for you, because basically this will streamline this whole process of ringing up, taking payment, finalizing, ringing up, taking payment, finalizing. Oh, you are you're wanting to do a layaway. Okay, well, let's go ahead and click the sold to account. We'll pick the account, create one if needed, and then that way it just keeps right on going. You can go ahead, process the sale now for this specific account. Let's go ahead and do one here for someone else. Let's go ahead and pull up Mr. or Mrs. Pepperoni. Still haven't figured out if it's a he or a she. We'll go ahead and we'll do a sale. Let's sell something else this time. Let's go ahead and sell a music stand. And we'll go ahead and we will take the payment for that. We'll just go ahead and click cash again, say it's exact change, and then we will tender and finalize. And then what we'll see is we're going right back into point of sale, and it's right back to that generic cash account. So that's another idea that you could use to help streamline this process. While we're kind of thinking about minimizing the number of mouse clicks and screen taps, if you are wanting it to not worry about asking if you'd like a receipt or printing that receipt, you can also set up, again, in your workstation settings, what's known as a default receipt printer. So if we take a look at the POS tab and take a look at devices, you'll notice there's an option here for default sales printer. And basically what I can do is I can pick that, and then what I will do is I will find something here. Let's just say it's OneNote. And I'll just go ahead and hit save. And no, let's not do OneNote. There should be an option. There we go, print to PDF. I'll just go ahead and save that. So I'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then with that set, and I've been kind of really blazing through it, so apologize if you haven't really been seeing it from any internet lag. But when I go ahead and sell something now, oops, let's go ahead and actually put in the whole item number here. There we go, and we'll tender. And we will go ahead and say cash, and I'll say okay. And then I'm gonna go ahead and click finalize. I'm gonna slow down, because prior to just now, I was bringing up that screen and specifically saying, okay, not just cancel the print. But now, because I've specifically chosen a given printer, and in this case it was the option of printing to PDF, it's going to ask me, okay, where do I want the PDF to save? So that's kind of the idea with that. You can set up your specific point of sale receipt printer as the default printer, and then that way it's not going to ask you if you'd like to print that. It'll just go ahead and do it for you. Now, there is a specific thing that you can do as part of point of sale. It's a function button. Let me see if I can find that function button over here. Functions are in the wrench menu, and there's a specific function called no receipt, or something very similar to that, or do not print receipt. So the idea with that is prior to, there it is, no receipt. So if that button clicked, and you can see how when I click on it, it kind of looks like it's pushed in. With that button pushed, then basically it will not ask you to or print a receipt. If you've got it set to auto print, it'll basically, for that transaction, skip the printing of the receipt. So that way you can, if they specifically say, I don't need a receipt, you can help save yourself a little bit of paper. Now, while we're on the topic here of, again, just kind of streamlining things, and if you're staying in point of sale, you might recall how in prior versions, it would pop up a little section in the lower left corner that would come up with an amount of change that was due. Well, if you're staying in point of sale like this, what you're gonna wanna probably do is have it pop up with something in case there is any change due. So let's take a look once again back in your workstation settings. Here in the workstation settings, I believe it is on the POS tab here. But if we go ahead and go into here, there's going to be an option in here. Oh, by the way, if you don't want it to print any sales receipts at all, then you can just check mark this option right here, do not print sales receipts. And then you can always go back and have a button on screen that will say reprint last receipt if that would be helpful for you. Now, we'll get more into the button strategy as we progress here. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I am thinking that it's actually going to be here on the miscellaneous tab. And what I'm looking for is an option where it can pop up what the change due is. I'm trying to remember specifically where that is. Maybe it is back in here. I know it's in here somewhere, and I should have reminded myself of where it is. But basically the idea with that is it can pop up on the screen the amount of change that is due. And that way, because normally when you're doing these transactions, and I'll just pop up again a little quick sale over here. The amount over here that's remaining, if I do an item, RT14, and if I take an overpayment on that, so they hand me a $5 bill, and I click that $5 bill respectively there, you'll notice that it comes up and reminds me of that I owe them $1.52. And when I finalize that, it'll go ahead and, of course, print the receipt for me on that. But normally at that point, when I hit finalize, and it's asking where that should print, that screen kind of goes away. It doesn't really go away. It's just kind of in the background. And in the meantime, you're asking them if they'd like a receipt, yada, yada, yada. Well, that can go away. So you'll want to probably have something like this pop up as a reminder of how much change is due. And obviously that is triggered here. So let me see if I can find where that setting specifically is. I'm still getting used to a different monitor from working from home, so I apologize. And well, I might just have to come back and send out some kind of memo as a reminder there for where that is. I know it's in here somewhere, and I apologize that I can't find it and show you specifically where it is now for the life of me. But a few other strategies now. Let's kind of maybe shift away a little bit from some of these workstation specific settings, and let's talk a little bit about the layout of point of sale itself, because that's one of the big features here in version 12 is all of these menus are completely customizable. So while we're here in workstation or in the general maintenance area, let's go ahead and click on point of sale menus, and this is your menu editor. Now while you're in the menu editor, over here on the right-hand side, you have your list of menus, and it's going to default on whatever your start menu is for your workstation computer. So as you can see here, you've got your start menu, and then when we went to, say, for example, like the payments menu, and it popped up with all those different payment methods, that is its own menu there. And everything else that we went to, like the functions menu, all of those different button layouts are different menus. So that's kind of the idea, is all of these are different screens that you can tweak and customize. So say, for example, let's go back to start menu. And let's say that you don't deal in service tickets, repair tickets. We have a couple of buttons here that are kind of all about that. And those are basically taking up valuable screen real estate here. So what you could do is you could right click and you could very easily just choose to delete that button. And it'll say, are you sure? We'll say yes. And we could also do the same thing for modify service ticket. We aren't going to be worrying about that. So that gives us basically two spaces for two buttons that we could put in there, and maybe we wanted to have some kind of discount button. Well, we could very easily make that happen. Let's go ahead and save our changes. And let's go to the discounts menu where we see the options here for different kinds of discounts. Let's say I want to have a quick and easy way to do a 10% discount across the board. So first and foremost, I can go ahead and copy my blanket discount percentage button. I'm going to go ahead and do that and go back to the start menu. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. And you can see how that kind of fits nicely right where those two other buttons were. Now, maybe I want this to be a blanket 10% discount. So what I can go ahead and do is right click and change its function. And what I can do is I can come down here and I can say prompt for, I'm going to leave that as prompt for discount, but I'm also going to put in 10% there. And what that will do then is when I go ahead and save that, and now let's go back into point of sale. And while we're in point of sale, I will go ahead and sell a couple of items, let's say RT14 and KV400N. I'm going to go ahead and click that blanket discount button, and you'll see it defaults to 10% there, but because I left a check mark to prompt for it, I could override that if I wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and say okay, and we will see that all of my items now have a 10% discount on them. So the music stand got discounted $1.48. The valve oil got discounted 33 cents for a total discount of whatever that comes out to. Math is hard. So basically, you can set these things up to kind of auto process a lot of these different functions. What you might find is the most helpful is taking some time to just look and see what all the functions are as you're editing these menus. So if we go back to point of sale, and what you might have noticed if you've been using version 12 is that the cash button for point of sale pops up and asks what the amount due is that or what the amount is that they're giving you, and it defaults to exact change. The rest of the buttons basically just assume that exact change is being taken. And I'll show you a couple of ways that you can work with that. But just to kind of talk about one of the main functions here that I'm alluding to, let me go ahead and get the GoToMeeting bar out of the way here. Let's go to the payment menu. And on the payment menu, I'm going to go ahead and right click and look at the cash buttons function. And this is what I was saying to kind of take a closer look at, because when you're setting these buttons up or otherwise looking at them, there's a lot of little check boxes down here that you might find extremely handy. For example, you saw when I was clicking the cash button for taking cash payments, it was coming up with exact change, but it was also giving me an opportunity to override that. And you'll notice I've got these two check boxes filled in here for prompt for total and default to total. If I had it to prompt for total but not default to total, it's going to default to $0, and it's going to ask me to fill that amount in. Now, alternatively, you saw when I clicked the $5 button up here, it just went ahead and put $5 in. But basically, this button is the same as the cash button. You'll see it's still a payment category button. It's still affecting my cash payment category, but it is going ahead and putting in $5 for the amount, and it's not prompting for any kind of total. Now, the default total checkbox there technically is kind of mute, or moot rather, not mute. That's not very quiet. Actually, it is quiet, but that's beside the point. But basically, having the $5 in there, it's defaulting to that, and it's not prompting for a total. So therefore, it's basically just putting in $5 in cash. And if we look at these other buttons, they're all basically set up the same way, except they're different amounts. They're different valuations. If we take a look at authorized card, and we take a look at its function, we can see that this is set up to do a payment authorization, where it's going to ask you to prompt for swiping the card, and it's not prompting for a total, and it's not defaulting to a total. So basically, by having all of that kind of as is, it's just going to assume that they're paying that in full. Now, that's basically the way that the rest of these buttons are set up. With the check payment, if we take a look at that, it's defaulting to the total, and prompting for a reference. Reference is basically where you could put in the check number that they're paying with, but it's not prompting for a total. So again, it's basically just assuming that if they're writing the check, they're writing for it for the full value of what they owe. So that's kind of the idea with that. Now, let me show you just a quick little question that I have fielded before someone asks, is when you are at point of sale, and I go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and throw in another RT14 here. And let's say that when they go to take a tender, they want to only pay a portion with a different payment method other than cash. You'll notice if I click on, for example, the option here for, let's just say, let's just say check. So we'll talk about the check. So we'll put in the check number there, 123, and of course you can see how it defaults to the full value there, $3.48. Let's go ahead and delete that. And let's say I only wanted to write the check for $3. Well, I can use this 10 keypad in the middle of the screen here. If I go ahead and put in $3 and click check, and again, I'll put in the check number. And what we'll see here is that it only assumed a $3 payment from the check, and it's asking for how the remaining 48 cents is being paid. So this little 10 key it serves dual purposes. It can serve as a quantity. So let's say I'm selling 3 music stands. You might have noticed that everything I've been keying in so far is a quantity of 1 of each. But if I go ahead and put in a 3 there, and then put in a music stand, you'll see how it shows now I'm selling 3 music stands. So that can serve as both a quantity for the sale and a payment amount. This is something else that also comes into play with version 12 specifically, is I can actually bounce back and forth between taking payments and continuing the sale. So prior to version 12 and version 11, if I got to a point where I was ready to take payment and I started taking payment, and then the customer said, oh shoot, you know what, actually, can I add this onto the sale? And you'd have to cancel out any payments that you already took and then take another payment, or put in the other things that they're purchasing and then go ahead and take the payment. That's not the case with version 12. We could go ahead, we've already taken the $3 check payment. They've written it out, and they say, okay, we'll keep that check, and now I'm going to put the rest on a credit card. Not a big deal. You just go ahead and you would click the authorized card button, and then it would go ahead and run the sale on the card for the remaining $47.83 in this case. So that's kind of the idea with that. So just kind of keep that in mind as we are going through these. And let's see here. It looks like there's a question coming in. Let me see if I can see these questions, because I kind of moved them away out of the screen here for a second. See if I can get this bigger. Come on, GoToWeaving. Come on, there we go. Okay. So the question that's coming in is, can the coupon button be customized, such as 10% off print music only? That's an excellent question there, Dell. Technically, the coupon button is just another kind of payment method. So if it's only for specific items, then technically you'd have to kind of figure that out in other ways. The coupon button there is assuming that you have some other kind of coupon function that you're taking, where it's kind of across the board coupon for other things of that nature. What you might be what you might want to look into is technically doing just like a line item discount, for example, where that's one of the discount functions, is you can do a discount percentage on current items. Another thing that you might want to consider along those lines is that technically items can only be discounted if they are flagged in a discountable category. So if other items, Dell, that you sell aren't normally discountable, then you can technically make sure that the categories that they're in are not allowing discounts, and then technically any blanket discounts that you apply would only apply to those items that are considered discountable. So that's something that you can think about as well. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but something to consider. Now, one other strategy that I did want to mention here before I forget is regarding the customization of buttons. And this is something that really kind of breaks away from prior versions of AIM and AIM-SI, and really is something that was only possible with version 12 now, is this whole concept of having to go to a separate payment screen. So obviously up to this point, I've been clicking this tender button and it's been coming up with my payment methods, but those payment options don't have to reside on a separate payment screen. Let's go ahead and go into point of sale, and let's go ahead and go to the payment menu. And I'm going to go ahead and take this cash button, just because I don't have a way of actually running a card in my demo system here. I'm going to copy that button, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to the start menu, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste that right along the side there. I'm going to save that change. And what we're going to see now, when I exit out of here and go back into point of sale, is that cash button is going to be right there available for me. So if I go ahead and sell, again, an RT14, not an RT1. So there's my RT14, and it's asking for 348, of course. I'm going to just go ahead and click the cash button, and there's my 348. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And you can see that technically I didn't even have to click that tender button. I can take payments right here on this quote unquote main menu. So that's something that you might find handy as well. There is another question coming in here. Let me pull that up here. I have to keep hiding the question screen here, since I only have so much room on my desktop now, since I'm down to my one monitor setup as opposed to the multi-monitors that I have at the actual office. Ed is asking, how do you change the sales tax for a receipt? So technically the sales tax is based on your tax rate of the of your system. So normally, I guess I would probably be asking what would be the reason for changing the sales tax. That being said, if you did need to, let's say, flag something as being tax exempt, as opposed to just changing the tax rate, you could definitely do that. You can either do that based on the customer account. So if I, let's say, change this over to, of course, I need to, let me just go ahead and exit out and pull up a customer that, if I remember correctly, is set up as tax exempt. So I'll go ahead and go to the account here, and let's pull up one of my schools. No E on the end of that, Mr. Vice President. Let me just check their account really quick here. And if I'm not mistaken, they are set up as tax exempt. They are not, but they are now. They will be tax exempt by reason of that they are a school. So this would be what I would recommend. If you do have customers that are tax exempt, make sure that they are set up that way, so you can flag them as tax exempt and put them in that way. And then when you are recording the transaction for them, whatever they purchase at that point, you'll notice comes up. It is coming up with tax there. Why is that coming up with tax? I might have to look more into that. That being said, if they are going to be just a quick cash sale, so let's just go ahead and mimic that. So we're back to being just a quick cash account. And let's say that you're needing to remove that sales tax for whatever reason. You can also technically right click and change the tax code and choose one of your either tax rates that you might have set up, or just the tax exempt option itself. So we can go ahead and do that. That would change that particular line item to be tax exempt, so you'll see that the tax goes away. For what it's worth, also there is a function for that over in the functions menu. So you'll notice there's a change tax authority option here. By clicking that, that lets you change to a different authority altogether. And then there is also a change tax exempt type. So again, normally you wouldn't do this on a quick cash sale, but by overriding that, that can let you go ahead and select one of those exempt reasons for the sale. So if we go ahead and say that they are a school, then without having to right click and do each line item individually, you'll see if I change this back to being tax rate 1, because I did set now that this transaction is specifically tax exempt, you'll see it's still not coming up with any taxable amount there. So hopefully that helps out there, Ed. Some other strategies for point of sale flexibility. You can technically have multiple point of sale menus that, depending on either what computer you're at or depending on who you are, could have different layouts. So for example, maybe if you have, let's say, it's more in the back office area, maybe you have a service department, maybe you have a separate department that is exclusive to some kind of other transactions, and you want to have different buttons for that point of sale screen on those different computers. Or maybe you have a floating salesperson that is needing a specific layout to help streamline their efficiency. You can have different menus for when you go into point of sale. So just to show you where those defaults are, let's stay on the on-screen functions here. So you might notice that when we are seeing these different computers over here, one of the options on the POS tab is to choose the home menu. So if I make this be something other than the start menu, let's say I make this to be the sell SKUs menu, I'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then when we go into point of sale, you'll notice it doesn't default to what we've been calling the main menu up to this point. It's now defaulting to our menu on a lot of different SKUs that we have set up as quick buttons. So this could be really helpful for, say for example, if you are a music store and you've got a combo department and they're making sales there, you could default to a lot of combo related items. If you're a gun store and you've got an ammo counter versus a main counter and you want to have defaults for that, or if you have a range check-in station, if you're a golf course and you have a driving range versus the main checking in for your tee time, or if you have a 19th hole for some refreshment sales, you can have all these different menus set up so that they default to those kinds of sales. Basically, you'll notice if I click this home button, it's kind of staying on this screen. So that's kind of the idea with that, is this is now the home menu for this particular register, if that makes sense. If we go ahead and let's just change that back to being the POS tab, and let's just make that back to the start menu here. So then we'll go ahead and resave that. And now we'll see that I am back to, if I go back into a point of sale, we're back to the quote unquote start menu here. So hopefully that makes sense there. Let me just see if I can make this window be a little bit bigger here for the questions. There is another question coming in. Are the menus tied to which computer being used or the person logged in? Your ears must have been burning, whoever you are, because I can't see who that is now. But that is actually the other thing you can do. So it's tied by default to the workstation. You'll notice if I come back here and look at the POS tab, it specifically is set up to the start menu, but it is also technically tied to the person logged in. I am logged in as default employee. And if I go to the admin menu, into the employee menu, and into the employee program, and I'll go ahead and select Senior Default Employee, there's a menus tab that you can do here. So on the menus tab, you can also have an override for not only the point of sale menu, but also the other menus. So you could have, I'm going to go ahead and say that we're going to default to the, let's say it's the functions menu, because why not? I'll go ahead and save that. And now when I go ahead and go into point of sale, it's now coming up to the functions menu, because that's the menu that I told it to default to for my personal login. And of course, I can close out of there. If you've got something that you've set in there and you want to get rid of it, you can right click and choose the option to clear. And now with that cleared, I'll go back into point of sale, and you'll see it goes back to I guess I must not have ever saved that for the workstation, because it went back to that that other function there. But that's kind of the idea with that is, yeah, you've got both the menus for the workstations and you've got menus for the employees. So by having them at the employee level, that overrides whatever computer the menu is set to for at the computer level, the workstation level. Speaking of, let's just go ahead and go back to that and just check to see if I forgot to save that. It should be, I see what I did. I changed the payment menu to be the start menu, not the home menu. For what it's worth, you might notice that there are options here for choosing different payment and return menus. So technically, yes, you could have different payment options, not only for the workstations, but also for the employees. Say, for example, if certain employees should not be allowed to do certain types of transactions, or they don't normally take certain types of payments, you could either have a different menu altogether. You'll notice if I actually switch this to, let's say, the let's just say, just because I don't have anything set up, let's just say it's the miscellaneous forms menu. Not that you would ever do this, but if I go into a point of sale and I sell some RT14, and if I click this tender button, when you click that tender button, basically what it wants to do is it wants to choose what's the appropriate menu to jump to. The payment menu if they owe you money, or the return menu if you owe them money. Now, they owe me money, so it wants to jump to this payment menu here. That's something that you might want to think about. If I hit tender, you'll notice it doesn't bring me to my payment screen. It takes me to what is known as the miscellaneous forms menu. So you might want to consider how that works in that respect. You can, I'm going to go ahead and close out of here and change that back to the normal payment menu here. But that's something that you can definitely think about, especially if you've got someone who floats, or a workstation that floats. Maybe you're doing these transactions on a tablet that the person is just kind of taking around the store with them, and they don't want to be hampered with taking cash. Well, you might want to just have that particular workstation set up to only charge to account, or to only do credit card transactions if you've got if they've got a little take along credit card receipt or credit card swipe, kind of either connected to the tablet or otherwise on their person. That's something that you could consider in that respect. That does kind of bring us a little bit into security functions. You don't necessarily have to create a whole new menu if they're not allowed to do a certain type of transaction. We can go into the admin menu, into employee security. Normally you would set these up in employee groups, but the idea with that is there are certain permissions such as payment levels. So if I go ahead and search for payment levels here, I know they're in here somewhere. Return, there we go. Payment and return category security levels 1, 2, and 3. Now, I by default have access to all of those, but as you're setting those up in the payment categories area, if a certain person normally should not have access to, let's say, taking a payment for miscellaneous income credit, you could go in and set that up as security level 1. And then if they're in a group where security level 1 is no access, then that button will be there, but if they try to click on it, it'll come up and say that they don't have access to that. So technically that's no different from prior versions, but I thought I would mention that there just since it kind of came up in conversation here along those regards. In this respect of setting up the button itself, let's go back to the menu editor one more time. So maintenance and general and point of sale menus. Depending on the type of button that you click on, so let's go ahead and look at the cash button here. You'll notice that there's no kind of security override as far as the security level, because that's going to be based on the payment method. But if I go into, let's say, the right click on this jumping to the miscellaneous forms menu, if I go ahead and look at the setting on there, you'll notice there is a security drop down here. And the idea behind the security drop down is it's going to reference some kind of security clearance. And there's a bunch of them in here. You can press F6 if that helps, because that way it just lets you type in basically what type of menu the security clearance is looking for. And it's basically linked to all the different functions that kind of make up what are on that menu. But in this case, let's say that they need to have administrative clearance in order to access that menu. So in other words, if they can see the admin menu on the regular point of sale screen, or excuse me, the regular menu, then they will be able to come into that. But without, if they don't have that selected, and let's see, let's go ahead and make sure it actually picked that. There we go. So if they have admin level clearance, then they will be able to click on that. But if they don't have admin level clearance, that button won't even show up unless you check mark allow security override. What that little checkbox means is that the button will show up there, but if they try to click on it, if they don't have clearance to the admin menu by default, then they will not be able to click on and go into that button. It will, however, allow a supervisor with that level of security clearance to come over on a one-time basis, put in their password, and then the employee who's logged into the transaction can continue on to that menu. So that's something that you can also think about as you're setting these different screens up. One other thing that I do kind of want to talk about, probably two other things actually, and then we'll probably be out of time here. But just a few other things here in respect to setting up of these menus, and that is in regards to overlays. If you watched my webinar on setting up menus in general, you might be aware of how overlays work. Basically, overlays are on screen all the time, and they can be set up so that basically certain functions are always there regardless of what menu you're on. In point of sale, there are several overlays. There's a main overlay, and then there's the delayed delivery overlay, proposal overlay, layaway overlay, all these other layaway or overlays depending on what mode you're in. For the most part, you can see how they're basically the same. They don't have the background image, but in the case of like the loaner overlay, it's got an extra button down here for changing the return date. In the layaway overlay, it's got the options for change paid in full date and changing the amount of the deposit or the down payment. So the idea with that is you can see how down here in the overlay dropdown, you've got all these different options for the different modes. And in this case, this is set to layaway mode overlay. So basically, when you click the button on the main screen, let's go back to the start menu, and you click that button that says layaway mode, let's take a look at that function. You can see how it's changing the transaction mode and it's moving us into layaway mode. And then what it would do is it would find the overlay that specifically is matched up with that mode, and it would display those buttons. So that's kind of something to think about there. If it's helpful, then basically one of the things you might be that you might find especially helpful is changing the background as you go into these different modes or go into different screens. So basically, you might have noticed the main overlay has the background image, and that image is right here. By clicking this image button, it brings up the image, which I have a giant image in here, and it's kind of compressing it down. But you could have different pictures in the background that would allow it to bring up different screens. You could either switch the background image, or alternatively, if there is no image, so let's actually go to, for example, the proposal overlay. And let me actually just give an example of this entirely. So let me go ahead and remove the image. I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to save. So now there's no image at all. So just to kind of see this in action, if I go into point of sale, you'll see that it comes up very plain Jane over there with that gray background. What I can do now is I can change that overall color of the background with the menu editor. So another strategy might be if you are, for example, in layaway mode, let's go ahead and click on the layaway overlay, we can change the background color. Let's say we want that to be some kind of green, like that. I know that's really harsh, but while we're also here, let's go ahead and select the proposal overlay. Let's do the same thing. Let's make the proposal be maybe this color blue, and we'll go back to one other one. Let's go to approval, and let's not do an image, but let's make that background color be purple. So then basically as you go into different modes, so we'll hop back into point of sale, and basically you'll have those different colors when you're going into different modes. And of course now it's going to laugh at me in the face and not do that. But that's kind of the idea, is basically you could have the different colors, which again, for whatever reason is not working for me, just to put egg on my face. Or you could have those different images. So depending on which mode you're in, it can have a different image. And again, the idea of the overlays is it's always on screen. One other thing you could do is you can have a specific image be related to a specific menu. So if we go back into the menu editor again, and let's say that when I am on the stations menu, I want to have a different image pop up. So I can click on the image button here. Let's go ahead and right click and select an image. Now I don't know if I have an image here, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose this barcode because why not, right? So I'll just go ahead and save that. So basically that'll have that image up in the background when I am specifically on this station screen. So then if I go into point of sale, and you'll notice there's no image right now. And of course, I probably have two transactions up, jumping in and out of these different transactions here. Let me try that one more time. And you'll see if I go to the stations menu, that image is going to be there in the background. So that's kind of another thing that you can do, is you can have different images depending on what menu you're at. Just again, kind of remind you of where you're at, and maybe bring emphasis to some more of those functions, especially if a lot of the menus tend to look alike, and that can be very helpful in bringing some attention to that. Someone is saying that I have to log off and log back on to see those changes, so that's good to know, and I'll pass that along. They go on to say that they customized their menu, and that was the tech advice, and it worked. So thank you very much for that tip. I'm not, I might have time here for that, but that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today in relation of basically going in, and you're not limited to kind of the what we used to call point of sale. In fact, one other thing actually before I just move into general Q&A is, and I talked about this in the webinar that I did way back in the day on point of sale in general, but you're not limited to just point of sale related functions. If we go ahead and let's say right click on display inventory is actually a great example because it in itself is not specifically a point of sale related function. It's just launching what's known as a form, and it's pulling up the display inventory program. Well, that's great if you need to look up something, but maybe you want to also just have, like we were talking about, being in that point of sale only mode. And so the idea there is that screen is always up front and center, but you still want to be able to do other functions, not related to point of sale. And having a front counter computer always in point of sale is great, but let's say you've got someone who just needs to clock in quick. No worries, you can have it be a button that launches a form, and we can go ahead and look for the clock in and out program. As soon as my computer catches up with me here, let's try that once more. There we go, clock in. And we'll pull up the clock in and out program, change the caption to say that. So now, when I save that change and I'm at point of sale, and again, maybe I'm in point of sale mode all the time, and I just want to be able to clock in because I was running late, you know, the dog ate my spare tire and I need to get in really quick. No worries, I've got that function there. So even though I'm in point of sale, I can do non-point of sale related functions. So that's a great idea if you have that front counter computer that needs to do other things without having to shy away or close out of point of sale, only so that you can go back into it again a few moments later. That's all I really wanted to talk about that I had on my list. So hopefully this has been helpful. As you probably saw, we are doing basically 2 webinars every week for the foreseeable future, as we're all working with either reduced store availability. Maybe you've had to shut down your showroom floor. Maybe you're working remotely and only fulfilling web orders, whatever that might be. We're kind of in the same boat, but we are here for you. So definitely give us a call for anything we can help out with. I've got a webinar coming up on Wednesday, and if I remember correctly, that's all about managing batch service tickets. So if you do have a service department and you're in a process now where maybe you're starting to take in lots of services. I know music stores, usually around this time of year, are usually starting to see an influx of rental returns. This can be really helpful for that. Stay tuned to that webinar sign up page because I will be rolling out more into the end of April and probably the beginning part of May. We'll of course also send out some reminders here and there. Otherwise, let me go ahead and just see if there's any other wrap-up questions here. We go ahead and re-expand the questions box here so I can see who is mentioning what. So John, by the way, that was Marjorie. I want to give credit where credit's due. Marjorie talking about having to log off and log back on to see those changes. Thank you so much, Marjorie. John asks, does the image go to a default image if you don't change it for a specific menu? So basically it just it defaults to whatever is in that main overlay. So if you've got a specific image in the main overlay, then that's kind of what it defaults to. The overlay always takes precedence if there's nothing specifically set up for the given menu. Hopefully that helps there, John. Thank you so much for the question. And thank you to Del and Ed for the other questions as well. So it's always nice to have some folks that have some questions to make this a little bit more fun for me, especially so I'm not just talking to a screen and a camera looking at my face. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. That being said, it looks like we are pretty much at the end of the hour. If you come up with a question later and you didn't get a chance to ask it now, or if you're watching the recording and you haven't come up with a question, definitely shoot it my way. You can email it right to training@tritechretail.com. If you have any thoughts for other webinar topics that you'd like to see me do, send them that way as well. Because obviously I'm here to do these for your benefit. So if there's anything that would be of your benefit, then it's probably going to be to other benefit as well. So definitely let me know what those questions are. I got one more question coming in from Robin. When you switch over from 11 to 12, do the defaults carry over? That is an excellent question, Robin. In regards to this point of sale element, a lot of these are actually, as far as what I just talked about today, they're actually unique to version 12. They didn't exist in version 11. So what you might find is that you are going to be wanting to set up some of these as you get acquainted with moving into and converting into 12. Also, for what it's worth, and I talked about this in a couple of the conversion webinars that I've done, but if you are doing, let's say, a test conversion from 11 to 12, and you are taking some time to set up and customize these menus, it's vitally important, if you don't want to lose your work on those customizations, that when you're in the point of sale menu editor or the touchscreen menu editor, prior to you reconverting either for another test conversion or to do your final live conversion, that you come down here and you click the Export Menu System button. When you click that, it will give you an opportunity to save all of these menus to, in this case, an Excel spreadsheet, so that after you do the conversion and reconvert everything in, at that point when you do that, it basically wipes the slate clean and it resets all these menus back to what we call our default menu system. So once you've done that, after you reconvert, come back in here and click the Import Menu System button and import the file that you previously exported, and all of those customizations will come back in with that. So something else to keep in mind there, since that kind of triggered that question there for me, Robin. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that concludes today's session. Again, if there's anything we can do, just give us a shout. Send me an email at training@tritechretail.com. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for your support during this time of economic downturn. We'll be back to normal before we all know it, and we will go from there. So thanks so much again. Hope you're all well and healthy, and we will stay in touch.